what is the interest in them going to Vodafone comes along and sells on top of our network? I don't get that at all.
So if you flip that around, and given the install base that they have, or in terms of the presence they have in London, there's an opportunity to leverage Vodafone to actually resell the services that they offer. That's the opportunity.
But that's not what I think they're doing. That's what Ian was asking. I think they're just acting as a wholesaler, and I think Ian's query is a good one, because are they just cannibalising themselves? If they're acting as the wholesaler now, are they switching?
It's similar to the MVNO routes.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, it is,
but you see that. Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. We're going to try and be slightly more efficient than usual because we've got a very special guest, but he's so special that he's got other shit to do afterwards. But we're delighted to welcome Paolo Pescatore, Paolo the Fisherman Pescatore, who has been on the pod recently, our Mobile World Congress one, but this is the first one forever where we've actually had you in your studio. So welcome, Paolo. It's great to have you here, mate.
Thank you for having me, Scott.
And
Ian.
And Ian and Pierre. And move a bit closer to the mic. And Paolo, you're such an important analyst that after this, you've got to go and interview the CEO of Netflix. So that's why we've got to be a bit more time disciplined.
I would actually say he might be interviewing me.
Right. Oh, you're going for a job? They need a comms person.
What is he doing here, by the way?
Yeah, is he UK based?
No, he's based out in.
So that's why. So
come over here.
You've got a small window to chat to him.
Yeah. So
that's fair enough. And we still got like an hour and a half plus, but we just got to be. We normally go on for like over 2 hours these days, so we just got to be a little bit more disciplined. Which is going to be challenging because there's quite a lot. Yeah, people are cheering. Evan, if he's listening, is going about time.
About time.
That's my Evan impression. I don't think Evan listens anymore now that he's so important in charge of Omdi.
Well, he's got to have a listen to this one with
my little Evan impression.
Make sure he does.
He used to be our line manager, and he's the overall head of like the Omdia research stuff now, and he's an American with quite a sort of smooth, calm voice. So that was my attempt at an impression.
Was it?
Yeah, believe it or not.
It's kind of a Woody Allen voice, I always think.
Yeah, but not quite as neurotic.
No, but there's a touch of that.
Although, God, I remember you remember a little while back I did that trip to Istanbul.
Yeah.
And my wife came along. We hung out with Evan one day. And one day he was walking, I think we were walking past a bit of Istanbul that was right on the shoreline. And there were like sort of fishy smells. And he sort of said something along the lines of, "Those smells make me nauseous." And I went, "Oh my God, that's the most Woody Allen thing I've ever heard." So anyway, there we are. Evan won't thank me for any of these anecdotes.
No, especially being compared to Woody Allen.
Well, yeah, I've said it to his face, to be fair.
That's all right then.
Woody Allen's cool, man.
How far in are we already?
Yeah, well, exactly.
Is this the first of many tangents?
It is, sadly. Well, another excuse for a tangent
some of
is...
the tangents will be more telecom specific, though. You'll be happy to know.
We've got to give
really?
it...
Just telco.
Only telco tangents allowed.
Well, we're allowed to talk about...
Apart from the
things
first
like
5
Netflix
minutes.
or whatever, if you want. One of the reasons Ian and I are perhaps talking a bit more shit at the start than usual is that we just had lunch with Ericsson. So shout out to Jason and Gordon and Carl. Thanks a lot for that. And we had a couple of cheeky pints while we're doing that. So normally we haven't started drinking before the pod, whereas we have this time.
I couldn't tell.
No. Well, that's a good thing about...
Good.
That's a good thing about generally talking shit. People can't tell whether it's the alcohol or just your underlying personality that's coming through.
The smell gives it away.
Yeah. I know sometimes when we finish the pod, people go out and come back in and they're like, damn. We got to say, while we're talking shit, I mean, there's lots of opening bollocks, but the highlight of the opening bollocks is Paolo. So Paolo spells his name Paolo, which is the Italian way, and his surname Pescatore, you can probably tell is Italian surname. He's wearing Italian blue, and he thought, he knows that people, our guests, quite often bring stuff. So he just went to the shop and went, give me loads of, well, it's not all very Italian, is it? Give me loads of Italian stuff. So the more Italian stuff he brought, actually, do you want your Negroni?
Yes, please. I would love my...
Negroni, Moretti in there?
We've brought little tins of pre-mixed moth Negroni, which is gin, vermouth, Amaro. What's Amaro?
Campari, isn't it?
It's nice and...
I've had those before.
Exactly, vermouth.
I thought it's Campari.
It could be Campari,
Sweet vermouth, gin and Campari are the ingredients of Negroni.
Well, that's what he's got. And it's 15%, so go on, son.
Thank you.
Well,
it's a good job it's a little one.
Excuse hands with the ice.
Oh, thank you. Very well prepared.
My glass and everything. So he brought some Negroni in. He brought in. He's getting ambitious. He brought in a bottle of Prosecco. I'm going to nick that. And he brought in some Daddy Peronis, which Ian's going to nick, or at least some of. He's got 3 here, and you might not want to carry all of them home.
Manage that.
And then he's brought this is still quite Italian, some grissini. I was going, when are we going to eat breadsticks on a fucking podcast? But there we go. He brought some antipasti and some more antipasti.
Oh my God.
And then,
that looks good.
And then he just thought, fuck it. We'll get some Krispy Kreme donuts as well.
Do you know what we can take?
Maybe that's why, in memory of Jamie, he used to eat a whole pack of donuts on the podcast.
Well, actually, the time that I was here, that you weren't here, Scott, let me just flag that.
That was that one?
It was the Krispy Kreme one. So I just thought, just to have a little bit of linkage, But I saved the best for you.
We can take those out to the pub afterwards.
What, the nibbles?
Yeah.
Come on, just sit there and eat antipasti at the pub.
Well,
chin chin.
Cheers, mate. We just got... we had to upgrade to neck oil this time because they didn't have any Brewdog. And neck oil's a lot more expensive. £8.50 for a 4-pack from Tesco's. What's that all about, Paolo?
It's almost pub prices.
No comment.
Scary, isn't it? So nice one. That's a great haul. I'm just trying to work out what we're going to do. I think we're going to have to stick it in the fridge and worry about it later. Oh, no, God, we're not going to be here next week, are we? Because we're going to be in Copenhagen.
Eat it in the pub. Okay,
fair enough. Well, suddenly it makes a bit more sense, that suggestion, doesn't it?
A little bit of nibbles. Come on, let's crack on.
We can. If you want to be eating salami while we're talking, then we can. All right. You're right, Paolo. Let's crack on.
It's the Italian style, Scott. Yeah. In company, chatting away.
Yeah.
It's about multitasking.
Yeah, and just have like massive European meals.
You want a cigarette too?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Paolo, to people who don't know him, is an analyst. And Paolo, you've got quite broad areas of coverage, definitely telecoms, but also like in the sort of media. And I'd say compared to some other analysts we've had on, you're a bit stronger on the consumer side rather than the core network B2B sort of side. Is that fair?
Yeah, I guess it's fair. Like, industry analyst by trade, over 25 years experience. Started off.
Were you with this lot back in the day?
I was good. Yeah, my first job was with Ovum.
There we go.
At the time, 190 employees.
These days called Omdia.
These days, of course, called Omdia. And yeah, started off looking at mobile devices, technologies, then looked at fixed line services. And then in time, you keep thinking, okay, well, every new generation of network, what differentiation is there beyond kind of faster speeds, lower latency? So I kind of believed as an individual and as an analyst, you've really got to give yourself a kick up the backside and reinvent yourself. So naturally looked at kind of content delivery, media services. And I kind of position myself now as perhaps one of the very few analysts that looks at the connected user in the converged world.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
And so a lot of it, I've done all the reports, I've done all the numbers, and there's many people out there who do a good enough job of covering that aspect. But, one thing I take pride in is I love going out there, being at events, talking to people, understand what's going on, and kind of shape my thinking about where it's all going. Now, if I carry on, then we might...
Well, I'm pleased you talk about how you like being at events, because one of the things that anyone who knows you and certainly who follows you on social media is you quite regularly got a shot of Paolo at an event. Sometimes there's a selfie there. But you do go, and this will be one of the main things we talk about, you do go to a shitload of events. I'd say the only analyst I'm aware of who seems to travel as much as Paolo is Dean.
Dean, bubbly, maybe.
Yeah.
But you must run into each other a lot of the same events.
We don't actually. That's bizarre. Yeah, I've got.
Dean will do the more more in the weed stuff.
Yeah, I love Dino, and we've been covering this industry for as long as I can remember. And but I think I think he goes to very, very specific targeted events where I perhaps take a very broad view. Where my flagship events typically are, let's say, CES, MWC, NAB, GITEX, IBC, IFA, and there's a couple of others on the fringes.
Yeah, so like we don't go to NAB or IFA.
Yeah.
You spread it, and given that you're a one-man band, you're a hard-working guy, so fair play to you.
Thank you so much.
And that's another reason, apart from your magnetic personality, why it's so great to have you on the pod.
Stop it. Stop it.
Stop sucking up to the guest.
And I can't believe this is the second time this week that
we bumped into each other.
We bumped it in the third time with Ian.
So let's do
Are we going to see you next week, actually? as well?
I was going to. Unfortunately, I can't make it. Well, I'll make the call. I'll make the call Monday morning. But yeah.
So he was thinking of going to DTW, but perhaps not. What was I going to say? So yeah, let's in the opening bollocks we've got quite a lot to cover, so I'll sort of keep it concise. But last time we saw Paolo was on Wednesday, where Vodafone 3, or Threedafone as I like to call them. I wish they'd gone with that.
I got an email from them from 3 saying, "Hey, we merged finally."
Right? Yeah. Well done.
Are we doing this in reverse chronological order?
I guess so. I'm just being stream of consciousness. I mean, if you think I'm doing it the wrong way, then feel free to butt in.
Okay. Well, I thought we were going to talk about Vodafone 3 quite a bit anyway.
But we're thinking making that a second segment anyway.
Okay.
So we met, and we'll put a pin in it because we'll talk about it more. But we met there, and that was quite a cool event. It was at the top of a building called Horizon 22. Amazing views over London.
Amazing views.
I mean, you were just admiring the views from this office, but that's nothing compared to that place.
And it was a wonderful sunny London evening.
Yeah, lovely and sunny. And they put on good booze and all that sort of thing. Nice posh nibbles, canapes. My only criticism would be the length of the presentation, on which we'll probably discuss more.
Yeah.
And you, being such a busy man, you had to bail halfway through, so maybe we'll fill you in on what, if anything, you missed.
And I just arrived in time for it from the other side of the world.
Yes, of course. And so,
we'll get
itinerant chap that you are, that's going to be our opening segment. We're going to ask about what Paolo's day job, and one of the things he's just come back from is a Worldwide Developer Conference for Apple. So we can talk about
Cupertino.
Yeah, I know, he gets everywhere, man.
And then last week, Ian and I were in Paris together.
Yeah.
In the Joie de Vivre.
Exactly. So you were there at the French Open because we people know who listen to the podcast regularly. We recorded a day early, so Ian could go off and do that.
What a final, by the way. Wow.
Yeah, we went at the final, but the semi-final was good.
I don't really want to talk about the semi-final.
Wasn't there an injury?
I don't really want to talk about the final.
There were some Italians involved.
And Ian, it was just like looking at Ian's face.
Musetti.
There was this there was this hype and hope in Ian's face about, Alcaraz getting through, and then as Musetti was doing really well, you could just see Ian's face drop and saying, I just cannot bear being with this Italian.
Were you getting a bit smug?
Well, no, I was just being very calm. And then Ian kept looking at me every time Alcaraz had a ball breaker. And
that's a mistranslation from the French, yeah?
Ball
the break. And you were calling it a ball breaker.
Yeah.
Right.
And then
which we found very funny, having had a couple of glasses of wine. I'm not sure
confirm that.
I'm not sure if the ladies who were at the event found it so amusing.
Right.
But
and then very, very
careful, you get in trouble with Ofcom saying shit like that.
Ladies, is that a word you can't use?
Well, because they don't like the manosphere, do they?
Oh, anyway, dearie me.
We won't get onto that.
And then by the end of it, Ian was very happy, of course, that Alcaraz had won.
I actually wasn't. He
wasn't fast.
I was just trying to wind you up.
And when I saw the final out in Mountain View that morning,
the final was really amazing.
It was one of the best finals.
It's nice to watch a final where you don't really care that much who wins, but because they're both quite likeable and they both play pretty sort of watchable tennis. But
huge spectacle.
And it was really competitive.
Has it ever
anybody
happened
could have won that.
That a player saves 4 championship points?
That was unusual. I mean, I was sitting next to my wife at the time, and she went, "Well, it's over now, isn't it?" Because he was love 40 down. It's 5-3, and it's like there's no way he's coming back from this. But to come back and then win it in the fifth set,
that's fucking impressive. Mental fortitude.
Yeah, 22.
And so Yannick Sinner's obviously Italian as well. And you're Paolo. You obviously got an Italian name, and you look Italian, but you got a London accent. Were you born here?
Non lo so. Dimmelo te. Nato cresciuto qui, però di origine sono italiano, sì.
Cool. God, quite fancy him.
Origin.
That's pretty nice, isn't it?
Yeah. Je t'aime, Scott. Je t'aime.
Well, these are the two sexiest languages, French and Italian, in here.
Yeah, probably.
Vien conmigo stanotte.
It's enough to turn my attention. I understood that. You could come with me tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I speak a bit of Spanish and they're similar.
Bueno, signor.
So you've always got Italian fame. Were you born here? Or
I was born in Woolwich.
Right. But your parents' generation Italian.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. And you obviously speak very good Italian.
I'd like to think I'd get by.
Was it they only spoke to you in Italian?
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Yeah, but then you replied in English, and
I hated it as a kid. Obviously forced to go to Italian.
You're trying to be a geezer.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to grow up and be one of the lads in Woolwich, and it was obviously hard because I resisted it as much as I possibly could. And then it was only once I got into my teens, the value in actually speaking, understanding Italian. Then obviously did GCSE in Italian, and I made sure my university degree allowed me an element of Italian and then study a year abroad. And of course, it's great doing a presentation presentations with Italian clients, which is bizarre because you turn up and everything's obviously Italian o'clock. Time's supposed to be at 12. Things don't start at 1 o'clock.
You were very punctual, by the way.
You're very punctual. You turn up, you do the presentation.
And they go, you're not really Italian, are you?
I'm trying to
turn up on time.
Turn up on time. Call yourself Italian.
I'm trying to do it all in Italian. Then what do? They ask me the questions in English.
Oh, I get that when in Mobile World Congress. I mean, my Spanish is far inferior to your Italian, but I go to Spain, I give it a go, and they answer me in English. I'm like, wow.
You have a few conversations over there in Spanish with people.
Yeah, maybe I only remember the time.
It's not good enough, Scott.
Well, it isn't, and it's not that good, but I always think, well, I'm trying, you fuckers.
Yeah.
Do you know there's been loads of events going on this week, actually, now I think about it? Because there was a VivaTech thing on
of course, in Paris.
NVIDIA's been doing like a sort of tour review, because they were in London on Monday, so an Informer event, actually. We should give Informer a shout out, because it was one of their events, London Tech Week.
Yep.
Had a special guest who was going to do the opening. And it was obvious from the keynotes that Jensen Huang was there. So who's the special guest? Special guest was Keir Starmer. It's like I've never actually been at a telecom conference or a tech conference. Really, there's not a lot of telecom in it. But
Rishi was there last year. No?
Was he? Okay, so I didn't go last year, but to have the Prime Minister kind of open it's quite good.
I think London Tech Week's quite politically affiliated. Yeah. It's like the politicians
and
always
then
jump on it.
They sort of did a Q&A, the two of them, like did a sort of like fireside chat type thing.
That's not an unlikely coupling, isn't it? Keir Starmer and Jensen Huang having a chat. There's not a lot of overlap on that fucking bed.
Well, that's not what Keir Starmer would have you believe. He would have you believe that the UK is like positioned to be like an AI leader,
I'm very interested.
And they're spending. That doesn't really sound like him, but I didn't find him a very impressive speaker. I mean, but he's all in on.
You're worse than Spanish people with me.
I can't do it. It's Keir Starmer. I really can't. But he's all in on AI, and the whole thing. It was like an announcement about them spending another $1.5 billion on NVIDIA chips, basically. You know.
Aren't they complaining that all the US companies are buying the UK companies? I read about that.
I think for his level that's been completely ignored. All he wants is this notion that if you do something to do with AI, it's going to be good for the UK economy. It doesn't really matter I mean, clearly he's not that worried about the sovereignty issue down to who's doing the underlying technologies, because it isn't going to be a UK company. I mean, we have some small software experts and we have a lot of talent here, but they tend to end up going and getting bought by or working for American companies, and the chip company that's doing all the underlying infrastructure is obviously American.
Do you think that's a problem?
I think it's a possible problem, yeah, and I think it's actually a big geopolitical concern, but I don't think Keir Starmer's even, I don't know how much, he's probably not concerned about it because it's American. If it was, obviously it's a Chinese company these days, you're not going to get near the UK, but he's picked his side. But it's not, you have a falling out with Trump in the future or something, then... You know,
my issue with Jensen Huang's messaging right now is he's not sugaring the pill enough. It's too self-interested. Every time I see...
South Sea bubble, isn't it?
Yeah, every time I see him do a speech, he's like, people aren't investing enough in AI, which is code for they should buy more NVIDIA chips.
Yeah.
And I just think, he's been doing this for ages. I used to cover him like several jobs ago when it was mainly gaming graphics cards was what we were writing about NVIDIA about. And so he's a very experienced guy. He's obviously fucking competent, and he's turned this company into one of the biggest companies in the world. But I just think his messaging just lacks subtlety.
Well, the messaging from Starmer lacks subtlety as well, and a lot of it didn't make sense to me. There was like this thing about we're going to train 7.5 million people to use AI by 2030. So I just looked up quickly what the UK workforce is about 33 million at the moment. It's a big percentage of the UK workforce.
It seems so vague.
What are they going to be trained to do? Because the whole point... So the interesting thing was that he said this very close to when Jensen Huang had given an example of how you might use AI in a really advanced way. And he's like... Basically, it can write in the style of Shakespeare these days. You give it a prompt and tell it to write a poem about this conference in the style of Shakespeare. I think we did that once actually on this pod, and it'll come up with something. And he was giving it as an example. And this is the issue, isn't it? Is that when it's doing something that's deemed to be very creative and at the sort of higher level of our cognitive ability, what's left for people to do? And what are these people who are being trained to do AI, 7.5 million? What are they actually doing? Because if you ask the programmers, they say there's actually less role in programming now than there used to be. We were just talking about this a bit earlier, because it can do a lot of the basic coding. So are they being trained to use Chat GPT more effectively? It's like taking someone who's got healthy legs, putting them in a mobility scooter, and training them to use the controls really well.
So I agree with that pushback, but there's one caveat I give, which is a job function of prompt engineers is actually quite a major job function. In other words, let's say we're interacting with ChatGPT, and we both ask the same question, but with only one little variable in it, like one word's different, we could get quite different outcomes.
Answers,
And prompt engineers are people who are basically experts in this human-machine interface in its current manifestation. And we've always had people, anyone who, I guess, uses a computer, but certainly anyone who uses a more technical bit of kit, like, I don't know, a fighter plane or something like that. Yeah. They've got to be experts in human-machine interface. And this is another way. And I'm not saying, by the way, Ian, that these jobs are going to in any way be similar in number to the ones that are being lost. But that is one of the new job functions.
What a depressing job. That's what I mean. What a depressing job that is. A prompt engineer. It's a skilled user of a mobility scooter rather than just fucking walking to the shops yourself.
Yeah, no, I get the underlying philosophical point.
Like you could actually do this or write the story that you want or do something, or you can be a skilled prompt engineer who knows how to write a query in the right way. Daniel Royston talks about this a lot, actually. I get the point.
On the pod that Paolo was on.
I totally get the point that yes, I think it maybe was, but I get it. Yes, it's better to have people who know how to sort of speak to the computers, but again, this is what we were just talking about.
The layers of
abstraction away from the underlying maths that actually does this stuff is. We're a million miles away from it. No one really understands the roots of how it works except 6 people on the planet or something. It's a bit more than that. Right. I'm exaggerating, but
we might.
Move on.
I could chat about that thing forever, and I'm only going to move it on.
This is a good tangent.
Because,
it is a good tangent.
Well, we might come back to it.
But it's also, there's a broader question, and everyone seems to be kind of making any reference to AI, jumping on the bandwagon, because obviously, there's the floodgates of potential investment and capex. So I think that's
there's certainly a lot of money in it.
You look at the big tech guys in US and the amount that they've earmarked this year just on AI and the associate spending that comes, say, with the data centers and the compute power. You're talking at hundreds of billions of dollars. Hence why every government is now seriously looking to see how they can tap into some of that development.
No one wants to get left behind, do they?
Yeah, and that's the challenge. But the harsh reality, and I don't know if you're going to touch upon this later, from a consumer perspective, from a user perspective, is it sought after?
We're definitely going to touch on that.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, no, we're definitely that.
All right.
Is there a need for 7.5 million prompt engineers as well? That's the other thing.
No, and I was anticipating that point earlier when I said there's definitely not a like for like old jobs being replaced by new jobs, which is obviously the underlying rhetoric that always happens. But so that was London Tech Week, and so that was the highlight.
That? Wow.
That was all of London Tech Week.
That was the whole of London Tech Week. I've just summarised it in what I just said. That was the whole thing. That's all that happened there.
Whole fucking week.
And what else happened?
Well, that was definitely the highlight, though, wasn't it?
The highlight was definitely those two on stage.
Yeah.
It peaked very early then.
It peaked right at the beginning, and then it was down. It was like a tennis match where the first game's brilliant, and then the rest of it was like, you might as well go down.
So we're front loaded.
And did you see? No, of course you were in California.
But then apparently the Nvidia team cleared off. I did meet someone from Nvidia at the London Tech Week. Actually,
yeah.
I met the guy who's in charge of their whole telecom business. Yeah. Who I do kind of know previous Ronnie Vasishta. And
your write-up was a chat with him, wasn't it?
Yeah. And
this was Olympia.
Yeah. Yes, it was really easy for me to get to. It was like no excuse not to go there. It's 5 minutes away. So and then I went to the Nvidia team apparently then went to Paris for VivaTech, which a couple of people turned up from the Vodafone 3D from. And
there was some quite telecoms-y stuff going on there.
Yeah, well, there's a big Orange business thing going on there that they sort of co-hosted, I think, or it was part of VivaTech.
Yeah, there's been a lot of
there's been a lot going on this week.
Going on.
Yeah.
And then we had on Wednesday night we had that big splash that we're going to talk about in a bit. But I think in the name of time,
we're going to
that's going to be our middle segment. Our first segment is always the wheelhouse of our guest.
But you said to talk about the Vodafone.
I'm happy either way, Scott. Don't worry about me. I appreciate it. This is your.
What do you want to talk about first?
Whatever you guys want to.
He'll always defer.
I'll always defer. Yeah, look, he knows me so well.
All right, go on then. Given that it's come up,
I don't need any more.
Let's go,
Scott. I don't need any more airtime.
You can tell it's not pre-written, can't you? This pod.
Yeah, just about.
What?
No, well, let's talk about it then. That's fine. That's where the momentum is. Let's talk about that. So. The only one of the reasons I'm going to delegate it is because we've chatted about it once or twice before, but it's all right. So their big launch, and I thought the event was great. It was really smooth and all that sort of thing. And there were loads of people there, some of whom I can't even say I met. I met someone who we know from a previous life, and she's so important now that she actually wanted me to. Yeah, she actually wanted to say that, like, don't say in public that you chat to me because she's not. she's not supposed to be chatting to journalists. But anyway, so there were lots of like, I'll tell you after.
Yeah.
There were lots of bigwigs.
I can beep it.
And then there were journalists and analysts as well.
You can say it. I can beep it.
You can bleep it. No, it's no big deal. It's not germane to not germane to the topic anyway. And I thought it was good. And then they had a presentation. My biggest criticism of the presentation is it went on far too long.
It was a bit too long.
How long were you there for all of it?
I stayed right to the end. And
right.
I did scoot off as soon as the Max came off stage. But yeah, I agree with you. For what they needed to say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think Max is the new CEO, Max Taylor, isn't it?
Yeah.
Max, the new CEO, I thought his presentation was good, and they made a lot of promises, which people like us, all of us, journalists and analysts, are going to hold them accountable to. They made a lot of promises. I thought it was interesting, they went big on this sort of nationalistic angle, like with the Nations Network.
Well, I guess a lot of their lobbying leading up to it was all about the UK needs a better 5G network.
Yeah, exactly.
The benefit of the merger in the interests of UK PLC. So they've been very, very consistent with the messaging, as Ian said.
So it's consistent with what it just struck me, just as a first impression, how much they repeated it. That was obviously a distinct primary comms strategy.
Well, I agree, but I think there's also certain points they need to land, and you ensure that they land by reiterating and being very clear. And I think...
But why do you think it's so important for them to back up the Nations Network?
Well, I think it's interesting. If you look at...
Is it called the Nations Network, or is it called...
that's what they're calling it.
Well, that's a separate... But if you look at the previous mergers in the UK, mergers, acquisitions, JVs, whatever you want to call them, look how long it took for BT to integrate EE, and some of the messaging that's come out of that over time, the change of strategy, some of the branding issues, let's put it like that, and obviously we can come back and discuss that. Then you look at Virgin Media and O2, that's an absolute car crash. There's no way of dressing it up, let's be frank about it.
Car crash?
Well, look,
they don't seem to be investing at the moment, anything.
Well, I think they're investing now, but I think it's taken them some time since the honeymoon period, where they obviously brought the converged product together, which was a very simple prop called Volt, and then since then they haven't really developed in bringing new products to market, new services to market. Customers
are they losing share?
Yes, customers are heading in the wrong direction. They're hemorrhaging subscribers across the base. Financially, they seem to hit their guidance, but I think what's saving them really are price rises, and that's not
free international roaming apparently.
Well, O2
is the only one that
O2 is still very much. But anyway, that's a side point. But anyway, just talking about that whole landscape. So I think Vodafone in Free, they've learnt some hard lessons from those particular players, and I think if you look at what's happening right now, there's probably an opportunity for a big bold move, and that's what they're trying to do with Vodafone. Now, I'll put my hands up. I was against it right from the beginning.
The merger.
Why? Well, I don't believe in a mobile champion, and I've always been of that particular view. Now, I'm aware of the merits that it brings to the UK market. I'm aware of the challenges that both entities could have medium to long term
without the merger.
So I'm obviously aware of that.
They certainly were making that clear in the build-up.
Well, they were making
a lot of sob stories coming out.
And one thing I would say that I think they got off lightly to a certain degree with the investment promise, and I would have gone a lot harder if I was the regulators on that particular
I heard other people saying that, actually. I noticed Enders Analysis putting some stuff out about the 11 billion, and I was a bit sceptical as well of this. I mean, I did a write-up today that looked at this 1.3 billion in the first year, and you've got this very ambitious target of going from, I think they said 47% 5G standalone coverage to 71% within year one, and then within the first 3 years up to 90%. So you're thinking this is a huge increase in coverage with an investment that 1.3, I mean, you look at the 11 billion over a 10-year period, 1.1 is a little bit more than the average, but it's not that much more. How are they doing this? I'm skeptical that they're going to do this in the way that they've said that they would need to give the UK a really good 5G network. If you look at all those CMA submissions, when they came out the behavioural remedies and what they're kind of going to be monitored on in terms of what they're spending. And the only reason this occurred to me is I spoke to we didn't give him a shout out last week, so I'll give him a shout out now because he Amit nagged
I know, sorry, Amit. I felt really bad about that after.
But Amit's a Spectrum consultant at Ether Consulting. I've known him for about 25 years. He's a good friend of mine, but he really knows Spectrum stuff. And I was chatting to him the other day, and he was like, I was talking to him about the coverage plan. He said, well, what are they doing it on? Are they going to do it on 700 megahertz spectrum? Because then, great, it's not that expensive to do, and you get the coverage, but it's not really 5G speeds. It's like the same issue we talked about before, low spectrum. It's not good for...
great.
Or are they going to do it on 3.5 gigahertz? And I thought, this is interesting because they've been held to meeting these targets. So I went through the CMA papers. There's no mention at all of putting 3.5 gigahertz into use. It's 700, 800, 900 and 1400, oddly. 1400 is not a band that you see mentioned very much. Those are the bands that they're getting monitored on. So I've got a query and it's unanswered at the moment. Are you actually required to put... I mean, their argument would probably be if you asked them, oh yeah, we're going to make use of 3.5 as well, because this is a big thing. They've got so much of that. But I don't think they're being held to any kind of targets on the 3.5. And unless you put that spectrum into use, you're going to get a...
No, I think...
You're going to get a 4G network.
I don't want to go into the pedantic nature of it, but I think A is the investment itself.
Yeah.
And then the other element is ensuring price guarantees.
Plus price guarantees.
On selected tariffs.
Yep.
So I think
those...
And then
social tariffs or whatever.
Yeah, and then the other one is on the wholesale side of the network.
Yeah, those
so
are
I
the
think
three things.
Those are mainly the three areas. But I think the targets, to your point, that we will all hold them accountable to. Now they're kind of set in stone. We'll obviously be looking closely on how they deliver on that over the next few years. Yeah, that's definitely.
I think Ian's point about these short-term coverage promises are interesting. I mean, I think
it's a really good story. Someone could do a story saying, "Are we actually going to get the 5G network that we've been promised?" Because if it's 4G coverage, by the way, Ofcom puts at the moment. I looked at the latest numbers they came out with in January. Every single network is rated between 94 and 96% on 4G availability, even indoors. I mean, I'm not really sure I believe that actually, because sometimes you get into a building and you can't. But that's what Ofcom's saying. 5G is obviously nowhere near. It's like they're at Ofcom's own figures for like non-standard. They were quite low for some of the networks. But you might get this very widely deployed 5G network, and then Vodafone 3 can go, we did what we said we're going to do. But if it doesn't really make any difference to the experience, are they? And by the way, they're merging these two networks. They've got all these different vendors they've got to sort out. Is anybody going to give a shit? Because I think the opportunity for them, if they're saying they're going to spend more money, and nobody really pays more for higher speed services anyway. If there's a slight quality improvement, what they want to do is get BT customers, don't they? This is clearly what they want to do. Try before you buy.
EE customers.
It's totally a play.
It's interesting because there's a broader question when you look at the UK market. Valid point, Ian. Absolutely valid point. But when I look at the UK market per se, are there really any customers to go out there and acquire on the mobile side? You're already going to be the biggest number one player by subscribers.
Was it 27 million?
Yeah, whatever it is, 27 million. Arguably, you got to retain that base.
Yeah.
And the biggest threat to...
Which I think has been a problem for them.
I think it's a problem to all of them right now. And the biggest problem facing any entity that owns licensed spectrum in the UK are MVNOs. They're the only ones gaining market share right now. So it's one of those issues. You have a great network.
Tesco's one of the biggest, isn't it?
Tesco, Sky, you got the promises of the new players coming in. So it's a switcher's market right now. So for Vodafone, for me, in the piece that I wrote, I don't know if you had a chance to read it.
I didn't, sorry, mate.
It's, damn both of you. No response from Ian, but that's a no.
Well,
we won't forget.
I don't know if he does he subscribe to you?
Well, he's on it, but I don't read. He doesn't read it. He's too busy. He's too busy interviewing very important.
You were going to send me a
people.
link, Power.
Well, not as important as you.
Yeah. Oh no, stop it.
Right, I'm going to fire it up now.
I'm
going to fire it up so it stops moaning.
The first point is to obviously retain the existing base to ensure that you've got the best in class experience. So as they're managing that transition and the network integration, they need to ensure there's minimal disruption for customers. And I think the big opportunity for that entity is fixed line.
Yeah, well, they made a big. I didn't cover fixed line at all in my piece, but I know a lot of people went with that.
That's the biggest opportunity.
That's the third point in the email that they sent me. I'm a customer.
Yeah, that is the biggest opportunity for them, and that's where they can go hard after BT, EE, whatever it is.
I wasn't clear how they were going to do it though.
We'll offer super fast broadband to millions more.
I know they've got their Substack, that thing. Was it a separate little?
No,
bulletin?
there's a piece that I wrote a couple of months ago in terms of.
Oh, I thought you'd written it the other day.
No.
Oh, right.
It was about opportunities for Vodafone and how others could react in the market.
We've got to give him a shout out now. I've mentioned it. Paolo does a Substack, and he puts quite a lot of insight into it. So check it out. He's got a freemium thing, and you can have a little taster. But if you want the full Monty, you got to subscribe.
It's all full Monty.
I'm happy to give you that little shout out, Paolo. Check out Paolo's Substack. What's it called?
Paolo's TMT picks.
There we are.
It's only $1,000 a month.
And he's one of the. Yeah. I think he does. I should have that tier. But he's one of the first.
That's the iPhone 16 Premium Max Pro, whatever tier.
He's one of the first analysts I've known that's gone on to Substack. So
it's working.
I don't think is it working out.
It's
for you?
working well. I'm really happy with it. Cool. I needed an outlet to actually write, as you would say, some bullshit, Scott. So. And it does the job. Yeah, it does the job. And, most of my pieces are behind the paywall because obviously the investment that goes into the events. The events that I go to. So there are plenty of other choices out there that are freely available to people. So I'm fully aware of that.
That's what analysts always do. Even back when I was an analyst, you've got to work out how much to give away for free to entice people and to get your name out there and all that. But you can't give away too much for free. You can't pay the fucking bills, can you?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
anyway, going back to Vodafone, fixed line, obviously the biggest aggregator of fixed line services now. Obviously they have OpenReach, City Fibre.
Yeah.
They've signed up Community Fibre, and they've got others in the works as well. And they've set a target.
They were quite bullish on fixed line.
I didn't really get the community. So I didn't understand the Community Fibre relationship at all. Community Fibre is a retailer, as far as I'm aware. They build out their own fibre through PIA, using OpenReach facilities, and they sell direct to consumers. I'm a customer, but they don't have. Are they going into a new model where they're going to sell Vodafone on top of the Community Fibre line?
I'd assumed that Community Fibre were being treated like a wholesaler because they've got their own fibre.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I've just said. Are they going to become a wholesaler? Because they're not a wholesaler.
Well, so I think it's hybrid. It's like the other way around from what. What was that Hyperoptic one? Oh, yeah, Hyperoptic just announced that they are trying to double their install base by using OpenReach. And Hyperoptic always used to just do their own fibre. I presume a similar model to Community Fibre. And now they've just gone, fuck it, we're going to do some wholesale agreement with OpenReach as well.
So
they're both hybrid models, is what I'm saying.
Is Community Fibre becoming the retailer on infrastructure that is coming from City Fibre and Vodafone?
No, I think they're being OpenReach.
And in that case, I don't understand it at all. Community Fibre is a relatively small London-based network that has quite good take-up compared with some of the other altnets, has its own network, and they sell the services on top of that. What is the interest in them going to Vodafone comes along and sells on top of our network? I don't get that at all.
So if you flip that around, and given the install base that they have, or in terms of the presence they have in London, there's an opportunity to leverage Vodafone to actually resell the services that they offer. That's the opportunity.
But that's not what I think they're doing. That's what Ian was asking. I think they're just acting as a wholesaler, and I think Ian's query is a good one, because are they just cannibalising themselves? If they're acting as the wholesaler now, are they switching?
It's similar to the MVNO routes.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it is, but you see that less on fixed, don't you?
Well, it's like, you talk about the mobile market being dysfunctional. Look how many players there are. The fixed line is over 150.
But are there going to be places where Hyperoptic, and presumably there are, where Hyperoptic and Vodafone are directly competing with each other? Because that's a bit weird. And that happens with MVNOs, obviously.
I mean, the fixed line market has been generally OpenReach. If you're a retailer, you're selling on top of OpenReach, and then you've got the companies that are kind of rolling out their own infrastructure to compete with OpenReach, sometimes using some of OpenReach's passive infrastructure. And you get a mix of them through sort of, wholesaler, like City Fibre is a wholesaler, isn't it? I just find that the Community Fibre Vodafone relationship, I don't really, and to be honest, I didn't really look into it very much, but I'm a bit confused about what that means.
I'm a bit
exactly.
My understanding was that it was going to be very much similar to the City Fibre relationship, in that Vodafone will be able to sell fibre services
on Community Fibre's network,
potentially customers on that network.
Yeah,
correct. But that's how I understood it.
And in City Fibre's case, that makes perfect sense because they've never been a retailer, but Community Fibre is a retailer.
Yeah, but I guess perhaps, in the survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
Working with Vodafone and its marketing power and reach,
Maybe,
there's a way to kind of,
And that's also why I brought up Hyperoptic, because it's again, they were all in on their own network and their own brand, and obviously something's happened behind the scenes strategically where they've just gone, fucking hell, this isn't working by itself.
Well, I think a lot of them are all struggling.
Yeah.
They've built out a network and they're struggling to sell connections and field
They're
capacity.
a mess. They're all
in a mess.
Community Fibre is one of the ones that isn't a mess. That's one of the very few that isn't a mess. They're actually had a quite a good financial year, I think.
I think all of them would claim in some cane, depending on how you spin the numbers. So I think this is more of a question of saying, look, we're happy to work with partners. And I think for the altnets, they're crying out. There's companies like VMO2, as we all know, are looking for that bubble to burst and sweep up some of those as part of taking.
Yeah, although they've apparently just stopped investing completely. What I've been told is Telefónica's just gone, we're not, they've kind of had a sort of freeze almost on doing anything at all. But yeah, that market's a bit of a mess at the moment.
Well, and pivoting back to the Vodafone thing, I thought...
And so very quickly, Scott, just to finish that, it's not just about obviously fixed line and fibre, it's obviously fixed wireless access as well, which Free have performed really well. So
I get that.
It's a complement of all of those services that they're able now to go to market.
I know the FT went with the headline about the broadband side of it, doubling the size of it, but I'm guessing that is including the fixed wireless access stuff.
I think that's all of it generally.
Because it just wouldn't make sense for me for them to be able to achieve that through a few sort of poxy community fibre deals.
But to be very clear, and Max made a point of it, and rightly so, and I know they're working on a very low base, but they are killing it right now in terms of quarterly net adds to their fixed line services.
Yeah, he said they got the fastest growth.
The
fastest growth is always one way.
But when you look at the numbers, when you do look at the numbers,
where
they're really struggling, where they have been struggling up until now, is convergence. So the majority of those signing up to fixed line are actually just buying the fixed line product only, and that's one area where they do need to address very quickly, and that's a separate conversation. Convergence is everyone hasn't nailed that at all in
no UK. But it was really interesting. That was another thing other than we're the nation's network, that the concept that they laboured somewhat, in my opinion, but that's telling. With comms, we're all analysts or journalists, we're the recipient of a lot of incoming comms, and part of our job is to pass that comms and work out why are they stressing it, why are they stressing this, why are they focusing on that, what's underneath the skin of it, and all that sort of thing. And so apart from the nation's network, which I think is basically a go at EE, BT, BTE, whatever.
Yeah.
And they're basically going, there's a new number one in town, or at least that's what they're trying to claim.
Well, they certainly are in customer numbers.
Yeah.
Even if they have shit network.
No, but I'm just talking about purely I'm not talking about...
Well, that's their marketing, frankly. That's not even controversial. They basically said we don't have good networks.
Well, that was their marketing prior to the... That was their whole marketing.
We don't have a very good network.
It's like we're having a nightmare.
We don't have the financial strength to have a good network.
That's why we're cheaper.
You used to talk to Andrea Donner, who was like, we can't possibly invest in standalone. They were quite blatant about that. That was the whole justification.
And now they're going, we're number one.
We need to have one network, not two, consolidate, cut out a load of sites, and then we've got the returns that we need to be able to do something.
You can't have it both ways, Threedafone. But I like to talk to the camera every now and then in case they're watching. But I thought the broadband one was another one that came out. I was messaging Ian on WhatsApp the stuff I was getting from it, partly just as a notepad for myself and partly to compare notes with him. And then I was going through the stuff I sent, because it's quite handy to do it while you're there. I don't know if you were making any notes while you were there, but it doesn't stay in your head, especially if you're going to go out on a lash later.
What did you?
Oh yeah, I was quite impressed. Like Kieran from the FT, his thing went up when I know he was at the pub with me. So like good skills, Kieran.
That was. I would imagine that was pre.
Yeah, no, there's some afters. Paddy from 3 especially gets a shout out. He always tries to lead us astray at the end of the night. Who was wearing a magnificent emerald green suit.
I echo that.
Yeah. But the broadband one I thought was interesting. They were really aggressive on the broadband side, and of course, we don't necessarily.
Well, that's a major growth for new customers for them. If you're already the biggest mobile network in terms of subscribers, A, you have to prioritise and retaining your customers, and 2, in terms of growth, it has to be fixed line and the immediate. Fixed services.
Yeah, broadband.
And then you cross sell and upsell into your existing base first and foremost.
And so, do you think they're going to try quite hard on convergent sell as well?
Convergence will come.
Yeah.
But I think right now
Take a
they have
while.
to nail the connectivity element. And you guys, look, you know this, and we've seen it not only in the UK, but in other markets, managing, these forms of mergers, acquisitions, corporate moves, people as well, the integration of the network as well, disruption, taking out the players, the suppliers, as you said, Ian, and trying to almost kind of, have a blank sheet of paper as much as possible. It's not easy. And look, it's very simple. It's all about execution. And can they execute? And they've moved very quickly. They're moving at pace. They already have the management team. They're already kind of making moves on the network side. Let's see where they are in a year's time. It's going to be a bumpy road. It's definitely going to be a bumpy road.
And that's where the more big promises they make at the start, like at this event on Wednesday, the more, they've got a lot to measure up to. You talking about they've got the execs in place. That was the other thing that jumped out at me. It's all Vodafone. I mean,
they're
this
the majority owner, aren't they?
Yeah, but only 51-49.
That's very significant, though.
Of course it is.
That's always the way it happens.
But normally they'll throw a bone to the 49 one.
But, in the lead up to it, who's managed it? It's all been Vodafone.
I know. I just still think it's telling. Normally, if you get something that's a merger, but obviously there's always going to be a senior partner in the merger, and that's fine. Everyone always knew Vodafone was a senior partner, but normally they throw a bone. They'll have okay, the CEO is from the senior partner.
The CFO is from
the CFO.
Yeah, Darren.
That's the one concession.
That's the one concession. But all the people up on stage, and God knows there were enough of them, on Wednesday, they were all from Vodafone.
Yeah.
Although some of if you go down to the tier below that,
they weren't all from Vodafone.
Yeah, and Ian Milligan's there.
Ian Milligan's pretty much, it looked like he's sort of the number 2 after Andrew Donner on the network side, his job title.
The number 2, that kind of makes
yeah,
my point.
sure, but they could have done. I don't think it's surprising that the majority owner takes most of the top level positions.
And let's
but
be
what
honest,
you
in time,
sometimes could get is like more of a kind of complete clear out of the management levels. Where
I think that will happen. I think the writing's on the wall.
Well, okay, but I'm just saying, like, even at the beginning of some mergers at the start, you see people like Ian Milligan with other things would have lost his job. He would just go.
Fair enough.
So, I don't know how that's going to play out. On the jobs thing, just quickly, Paolo, because you were going to say something, but I thought it was interesting they really downplayed job cuts. Didn't they? Did he say? Did I mishear
actually,
it?
if anything, they were talking about they were doubling down.
Oh yeah, but that's outside telecom. I'm talking about within the company. They've talked about synergies of 700 million a year, and then he went the retail footprint. When we bring things together, we're not going to get rid of everybody. They'll just leave of their own accord eventually.
Yeah. So there was only voluntary.
It was very clear that there would be a consolidation in the retail footprint. So I think there will be a natural reduction in the workforce there. So I think that came through. But then the point that Scott was just about to make, that they were very keen to point out there are job opportunities in terms of the areas that they're investing in, particularly around customer service.
But your point about natural, so they were emphasising voluntary redundancies rather than forced redundancies, yeah? But if there's consolidation on the retail footprint, fleet, whatever the fuck you call it, and they close a 3 shop, well, they're not going to. All those people who were in the 3 shop aren't going to go to a Vodafone shop.
I mean, look.
I think they're going to get. That's one we should call them out on. I recken there's going to be some forced redundancies, and we'll be like, hold on a sec.
I just think it's a weird message
to send.
I just think it's a weird message to send out. You're talking. He's got the FT there, like Bloomberg, Enders analysis. The investment community will expect to see job losses because that's where they'll want the cost savings. That's the whole point of it. They'll want to see savings coming from this. Don't pretend that. Don't do what T-Mobile US did and stupidly go, we're going to employ more people than the 2 separate companies put together, and then it turned out it didn't. That's how you realise. I think
they were trying to highlight the benefits of having a scale player in terms of the investment opportunities it would bring and the economic growth.
Yeah.
But I think, look, we're not alien to the fact that when you're bringing 2 into 1, naturally there are going to be, unfortunately, redundancies and because it's all about driving efficiencies as well. And there's a separate conversation to have just to throw into the mix when you talk about high street. What's the real value of a high street presence now? Particularly for a telco.
I feel 3 had been closing shops already.
I think, there's a general trend,
How many people like to go in and touch phones? I don't know. I mean, I'm not bothered, but I'm a fucking telecoms job.
I haven't been in one in like 15 years.
The only one who's really excelled on the high street is Apple, and they continue to excel at that. But when you look at the younger generation now coming through, are they really going into?
They're probably not, but if you... That's interesting saying they've closed 3 shops because if you look at the job numbers at the moment, they've not gone down. So Vodafone's annual report came out this week, which I think sort of it doesn't get sort of blasted around as an email, does it? Because the results are already
There's
out.
no new numbers.
But if you go in that's where you get a breakdown of who works in what business area. And the UK job numbers of sometimes before merger activity, they start doing cuts, don't they? Because they know it's happening. The job numbers are still at about 9,500 for the UK business. 3 were I checked with the man, the magnificent emerald suit that you just mentioned. They've been at for about 4,800.
Paddy McGarrigle.
So those numbers haven't really gone down a lot in the last year. So the investment community will expect to see some cuts, like pretty hefty cuts. If you're talking about, I think the 700 million that they were talking about in synergies, I hate that word, but if you look at that as a sort of percentage of capex and opex costs, it's over a fifth.
Yeah.
So you're going to realise that from
somewhere.
deconsolidating sites, closing shops.
Well, how long have they known this was going to happen? If you're a year away from a merger, you have a fleeting shop, you're like, let's just close it. Because whatever, we'll merge anyway.
But to your point completely, why would eSIMs is going to make this worse, isn't it? I would have thought. You don't need a high street presence.
Yeah, and then obviously everyone can do it on their phone or having an internet connection.
And that's one of the
signing up
pictures.
that. But then,
they've got a 7-day eSIM
you
free
order
trial.
a real SIM online anyway as well.
We had an interesting eSIM conversation, didn't we, with a certain telco at some point, not that long ago.
I'm going to guess that's Orange. But anyway.
Oh, yes. Thank you for
I will say...
but that was...
we can't say what we talked about.
No, because that was all...
That was off the record.
That was off the
record.
We did
it
was me the guest.
There was
only because I know you were
quite a lot of
French
conversation about eSIMs.
That was only last Friday.
Yeah.
There we are. Well, they just confirmed it now.
Weeks blown by.
I don't think we've revealed anything.
No.
But it would be...
I can't even remember.
I got one last thought on all these themes we've been talking about, especially the nationalism side and the no forced redundancies. In fact, we might even grow by expanding call centres or whatever the fuck they promised. I think it's political. They had a video recording from the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, on, and basically a lot of them.
See her, did we?
And then you think about the messaging. Who's in the room? So there's us lot. There were a lot of people like on the vendor side. I don't know if any politicians were there. They got, what's her name, Steph McGovern off the BBC, which is very much an establishment mainstream channel of messaging. And I think they were basically messaging. I'm always curious to know who you're actually talking to, because they weren't talking to me. Who were they actually talking to? And I think part of it is they were talking to politicians and regulators and members of the establishment to say, look, don't worry, this is going to be good for the country.
Sorry, I couldn't see who was there. I couldn't see beyond you, Scott. Sorry, I can't comment on this one.
Paolo and I have an ongoing bit of banter. I'm quite tall, he's not so tall, and this is part of our...
You're like Jeremy Clarkson and Richard Hammond.
There we go.
Lauren and
wow.
Arnie.
Have you ever thought of a spin-off?
Well, we did one time. One time, a guy did on LinkedIn. In fact, God, I keep trying to get people to comment on LinkedIn, and sometimes they do, and I'm not acknowledging them. But we might not have time. Anyway, one guy on LinkedIn said that we're like the Top Gear of telecoms. We decided that I'm Clarkson, you're May because you're a bit grumpy, and that makes Pierre Hammond by default.
Very, very quick tangent. There's
the youngest also.
The Clarkson's Farm programme. That's on, which I find quite amusing, but there was a pig that was born that was like a runt and so small they named it Richard Ham.
Oh, brilliant! Hammond.
It's just hilarious. There's this pig called Richard Ham on the farm.
So,
you're thinking of leaving, Scott, and doing your own spin-off?
You'll never leave.
No, I could never be Jeremy Clarkson. He's a fucking amazing broadcaster. The fact that he's been able to, on top of all his success with Top Gear and then the Amazon thing, to then go off and start a farm and make a real success out of that.
Yeah, but I could see you run. Yeah, I could see you running your own country pub.
Yeah.
I just don't think I'd be as good a broadcaster as Jeremy
Yeah.
Clarkson. That's
With a towel on his shoulder.
I just think it's phenomenal. Like, and then you have the farm on the
Bit
side.
of banter.
Yeah.
You'd be the guy, the landlord, bantering all day long while all the staff go and do all the work and moan about you bantering and not doing any work.
No,
That's the sort of landlord you
imagine a podcast.
But you bring the
corner.
customers in.
I completely admire what he's done. That whole just unfiltered, slightly blokey banter obviously is right up my street. So
no, I like that. Clarkson's one's brilliant.
I'm all in favour of it.
Yeah.
But he's not for everyone, is he? He can be a polarising.
For people who find him polarising, they should watch that series because he's much more sort of sympathetic side of him than those people would think.
Interesting. Yeah, I've actually never watched a single episode.
It's on my watch list.
This whole stuff about him being anti-environmental and stuff. What a load of bullshit! If you watch that, you'll have a very, very different impression of him.
I think he gets into like the politics of agriculture and that
completely.
Sort of thing, doesn't he?
Like He's actually a good sort of spokesperson for the farming community at the moment, in a way.
Cool. Yeah, no, I totally respect
Welcome
that. My son was always
farming podcast.
He still is now, but always when he was a kid, he absolutely loved Top Gear, and he just loved the banter. That's what I really appreciate about it. And some of it might be a bit contrived, but if you look at his whole career when he first started doing Top Gear just by himself, before he even had James May and Richard Hammond, he just got that Jeremy Clarkson delivery, and he just sort of owned that sort of slightly blokey space.
He made the thing fun. Like the car shows were so boring. Yeah.
And that's the biggest compliment we get for this podcast, is that we make this subject matter entertaining, and I always relish that when it comes in. So yeah, that's my feeling about.
What was the feeling
about Vodafone? Yeah, I know. I've just got used to bringing the tangent back. You see.
You're supposed to remember what was being talked about.
Did you ever hear? Did you ever see? Did you ever see?
Leave soon.
Yeah, no, you got 45 minutes. Did you ever see Donald Trump when he was on with Andrew Schultz? Yeah. He was on with a comedian called Andrew Schultz, and he said, "I do think of the weave," and he was just sort of saying how he just goes off, and the weave is like a stream of consciousness tangent, but he goes, "I always bring it back."
Yeah,
and they were just
Biden's
pissing themselves.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think you should think about a spin-off.
Scott. Well, I'll see what my employers have to say about it.
I'd support you.
Would you?
I don't know if I could afford you, but I'd support you.
No, I'm very expensive. So I'm bringing the weave back to the Vodafone thing, and we were talking about the messaging and the key points from Wednesday evening's thing,
and the audience.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the messaging was at politicians and regulators and establishment, and basically saying, look, you've got a national champion here. Yeah. It's going to be great for England.
Well, I wouldn't quite say national champion as yet, because national champion
that's their messaging.
Not necessarily just yet. They want to kind of be the nation's network, yes, which you could imply to a certain degree, but obviously, a national champion in telco requires having fixed and mobile infrastructure as well, and then having best in class.
So that's one of the reasons they were banging on about broadband.
But I think there's a number of elements to it when you look at, obviously, in the context of what's happening all across Europe and the need to have perhaps consolidation in a lot of those markets. But you're right. If you look at what's happened in the UK market, and obviously the failed 3 and O2 merger, it is a significant moment in that they've been able to get it over the line. They've been able to convince the regulators and the CMA. And a big part of that, of course, is all the lobbying and.
And I actually think politics played a part in it. There was some messaging that was coming through where I reckon the CMA got lent on a bit by politicians. Just fucking don't be a dick about this.
Well, look, I can't comment on specifically about being dicks, but I think, when you have Ofcom coming out, which they have done in the past, in saying that the UK cannot support 2 subscale operators, there we go. That almost kind of paved the way. So to your
there were a few little hints.
But just for the record, and I've said it, in the run up to the announcement, when it was actually announced, what was it, a couple of years ago now? Yeah. And even during this time, if you look at the best 2 performing mobile network operators in terms of quarterly net adds, it's always been Vodafone and Free.
That's it, because they've got the worst networks.
But they've always had
all the stats.
Well, if you look at the subs,
so they're good at selling.
Maybe not necessarily of the last few quarters, but over that period, they've performed really well in terms of customer acquisitions, which is
kind of done it from some other way, but. I mean, Vodafone...
Well, it's the brand that some brands have done really, really well.
Vodafone, curiously, I thought, since it started whinging about return on investment and all these metrics that meant that they needed to merge with 3, it's actually done very well, which almost slightly undermines the case they were making. 3's never been in a great position. But I think the politicians getting involved, I agree with you, Scott, and I also think it's complete bullshit. I think they bought a message about... This comes back to... Their whole thing about this, by the way, the fibre, broadband, all that stuff, was not how this was sold. This was sold on the basis of 5G. The whole thing was about 5G. It was 5G. All about having a standalone 5G network across the UK. And I think the problem that we've got with that, that we've always had, like we've talked about this a million times about, is why does 5G matter? The UK, Keir Starmer and this lot, this bunch of muppets that kind of run the country with him, still seem to be buying into this idea that was going around 6 years ago that 5G would be this game-changing technology, where actually it's not really any different from... The consumers don't care about 5G. If they got a really good 4G connection, they wouldn't give a shit. And the pitch about standalone is it's to be seen. We don't really know. It could still.
And
turn
again,
out
a consumer's going to know.
And they're now talking about in 16 years' time, 16 years since 5G came along, we'll have a widely deployed 5G network. Nothing at all about 6G, by the way. Well, you talk about a future-looking country.
That's another
future-looking.
So I agree, because 5G arguably should be at a mature stage right now, which goes to show how far behind we are. And you're right.
But why does it matter that we're behind anyway? I don't think it makes any difference.
I agree, because from a user perspective, consumers aren't necessarily going to want to have
mobile connectivity, data connectivity,
robust, reliable connectivity. They want to still be able to make a voice call, and I'm with you on that point, Ian.
Or check data.
Yeah,
voice or data. You want to be able to do it well. You want to be able to do it indoors. By the way, a lot of this stuff is irrelevant anyway, I think, because again, a point we made on the pod a lot. Most people use Wi-Fi, frankly, on their smartphones. Most data consumption on smartphones is by Wi-Fi. Where do most people use their smartphones? They use them at home and in the office.
Even on travel now in most places.
Right.
Now it's becoming a lot more
So the whole pitch about why we need this nationwide 5G, the fact that Rachel Reeves was there, I thought was a bit sad. It just shows these people really don't have a clue what they're doing.
We've got to give a shout out on LinkedIn, actually. Dean Bubley did a cool post on social media where he's talking about how he can't believe people, like, I'm going to butcher it because I can't remember it precisely, but it was a few days ago. You can't believe people are still going on about 5G for this, that, and the other in exactly the environments where we use Wi-Fi. It's like, I mean, remember, we've spoken about this for years, where people start going on about VR as a 5G use case. In fact, we'll get onto your glasses in a sec, which are AR. But we're talking about 5G.
Not these ones, but that's
right. Well, there's the Apple ones.
Yeah, that's
and that sort of thing.
Well, no,
But people were talking about VR as a 5G use case, and we were like, when are you fucking going to use VR on 5G as opposed to Wi-Fi? Now, there have been some niche arguments to do with latency, which maybe apply, but or security. But listen, I really want to make sure that we get onto some other stuff that Paolo can give us some unique insight into, and we've only got about half an hour or so left, and also, having had a couple of pints at the start, I could do with having a quick break. So if you don't mind, we'll cut short that Vodafone 3 thing, have a quick break, and then we're going to get onto other stuff. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, we're back in the room. We've got about half an hour left, so I want to get straight onto stuff that Paolo knows more about than we do, which is a long list, but one of the things that Paolo knows more about than we do.
Everyone's got an opinion on everything.
Well, indeed. But you actually went there. So last week you were over
this week.
Oh, no. This week. Yeah, it was this week.
But it goes live.
Yeah, but when this goes live on Monday, it'll be last week. But this week, Paolo was in California. And why don't you tell me? I won't butcher it. What were you over in California for?
No, please.
Okay, well, so Apple's got its Worldwide Developer Conference, and so it's where it does its big announcement. Normally on a software rather than devices side.
Correct.
I think. Yeah.
Superb.
And what was their big announcement?
Why weren't you there?
I never get invited, mate. We'll get onto that. We'll get onto that. Don't you worry. But why don't you tell us first of all, just primary source?
Yeah, I think I think there was, last year we went and the euphoria was all around Apple Intelligence, the big unveil and entry into AI. And I guess the year prior, there actually was a device announcement. It was the Vision Pro. And of course, the Vision OS software. But yeah, typically, you're absolutely right. Software releases for its products. And a couple of the big things that really stood out was a redesign of the UI that's harmonized across the product range, rather than having a single UI for each product.
UI's user interface. And is that the first time they've harmonised the user interface across?
Yeah,
everything?
I think it's essentially what they've tried to do to ensure there's a consistent look and feel between picking up an iPhone versus a Mac and an iPad.
It's already been pretty consistent, I guess, but it's
I think they've been moving towards it, but I think
not so much Mac.
Yeah, it's pretty consistent.
I mean, like an iPhone and an iPad look the same, more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah,
iPhone and iPad.
But Mac's a bit different, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, Pierre, you two both. And I presume you do as well. That's an Apple Watch.
That's an Apple Watch. Yeah.
So I'm the only one in this room that isn't really heavily invested in Apple devices.
I think, and it's fairly similar, I would say.
So by definition, it cannot really be exactly the same because you don't have like just icons and stuff.
And it's not primarily touchscreen. Yeah, that sort of thing.
But they're trying to harmonise it.
But it's the new UI. Is it called Glass? Did we imagine
liquid
Glass.
glass?
It's not really a new UI.
But it's not a new UI. It's more of an overlay.
It's a theme.
Yeah, it's more of an overlay to kind of change the look
It's
and
not
feel.
like the way it looks is completely different all of a sudden.
It's not radically different.
Right.
No.
They went from iOS 3 to 4, I think, when they went from like those 3D icons to like flat design.
But I think it's the biggest change since I don't want to butcher it, but I think since iOS 7, where there's been kind of, let's just say, an overhaul to the look and feel.
They've harmonised the numbers as well, haven't they?
Well, they've kind of made it consistent with years. So suddenly there's just a fast track to iOS 26.
Yeah, so everything's 26.
Everything is 26 to be consistent with the years.
Just to detail it, from our report, which Andrew wrote.
Which makes it, exactly.
So you've got iOS 26, iPad OS 26, Mac OS, Tahoe 26. What's Tahoe? Is that the
Mac?
That's Mac. Okay, yeah. And then the Watch 26, and then the TV 26.
TV OS 26.
So there's a lot of harmonising going on, basically.
I said it.
Yeah. No,
So
I'm not,
current products be compatible with some of this stuff?
Yeah, so I guess
If you just literally bought a Mac now.
No, you're fine.
But you'll have the
interested-
software update.
The new one is not compatible with Intel, though.
No, I know. I don't have an Intel chip on it. It's
No,
not
but
good.
if you did, you couldn't install
be
the new
fucked.
macOS. Yeah.
I don't worry about that. Nobody uses Intel anymore.
You're on the
Come
edge.
That's so passe.
You're at the tip of the spear.
I know, you wouldn't want to be an Intel investor right now, would you?
No.
No comment.
Yeah, no comment. Well, talking
As
about
an analyst, I can't. Yeah.
So talking about no comment, there's an interesting thing.
Here we go.
Can
Can I plead the fifth now?
plead the fifth?
I know. I know what's coming.
We chatted about this in advance.
Did
I
we?
think, yeah, we chatted about it at the Vodafone thing, and we chatted. Just
Oh,
don't
yeah,
try and make out that we didn't chat about it.
We did.
Okay,
we did.
He's slippery, this bloke. Is Apple like Paolo? I think fair enough. You get invited to those things, and the one of the many benefits of being invited there is you can report on it in a primary way, and that adds value certainly to us on this podcast and to your subscribers and that sort of thing. He's a guy who's actually there. He's heard it from the horse's mouth and all that sort of thing. Flip side is my experience, or not even my direct experience, my proxy experience, my understanding about Apple's approach to its relationships with the broader comms market is they can be a little bit sensitive. And
Can they?
yeah, you obviously this
I've
is
not
the first,
seen-
this
I've
is the
not
first
seen
time
it.
you've heard it.
Yeah, it's the first time I've heard of this, Scott. Can you,
Good. Well, that's fine. Well, I'm
example,
very happy to be the one who breaks it to you.
Oh,
Paolo.
have you? Okay.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. There was there's a very respected tech blogger called Ben Thompson who writes a blog, Stratacherry or Stratechery, however you pronounce it. And he mentioned, and his blog was called Apple Retreats on June the 10th. And it was very long. He always writes these very exhaustive things. He waits a bit of time. But he made reference to another very well-known blogger, especially in the Apple world, called John Gruber, who has a blog that's been going as long as I've been following this. Daring Fireball.
Well, that's what we talked about. Immediately that came to mind was Die Hard. Hans Gruber.
That was the joke he made on Wednesday.
Yeah, well, he
Before I was talking
remembered.
about Alan Rickman.
He remembered.
Hans' brother.
Yeah.
Simon Peter Gruber, Hans Gruber, and
Oh, my
John
word.
Gruber.
What's the best quote out of him from Die Hard? From Alan Rickman and Die Hard? Is there like a singing, like Yippee-ki-yay or whatever?
That's Bruce Willis, though.
Yeah, I know. I'm
Hey,
trying to think of the
motherfucker.
equivalent for his character. Anyway, you can think about that.
That thing in the Yakamoto Tower. What was it? Yakamoto Tower.
Nakamoto
Yeah.
Tower.
Nakamoto Tower, yeah.
Yakatomi Plaza.
That's
Nakatomi.
it. That's the
Nakatomi,
one.
there we are.
He
I
should
like
remember the quotes
Yeah.
that Alan Rickman came out with.
Yeah, he's not as
a fan
addled
for
as
it.
we are.
No, I know, but he's watched it.
So what
Anyway.
did they say?
So let's just talk about Die Hard for the rest of the pod. At WWDC, Worldwide Developer Conference last year, Apple went really big on AI.
Yes.
And they made lots of promises,
Yeah.
and they spoke about Apple AI or whatever, however they...
Apple Intelligence.
Apple Intelligence, there we go.
They seek to rebrand AI as being Apple
Yeah,
Intelligence.
and they've been having a go at it for ages. They were very early on these personal assistance things with Siri. That was about it was more like 15 years ago almost, I think, Siri. But it never quite took off, and Siri...
It was an iPhone 4, I think. So.
Yeah, I think you're right. And Siri wasn't all that.
No.
And
You could set a timer.
yeah, And then they went big on it last year, but this guy Gruber, who generally writes really accommodating stuff, I'm not accusing him of not being journalistically honest, but he seems to give Apple benefit of the doubt from the time I've read his stuff, which is fair enough. But he wrote, this was in March of this year, he wrote a blog, quite a long blog post called "Something is Rotten in the State of Cupertino."
Oh, that doesn't sound like someone who's being friendly to Apple.
Well, quite. And basically, he was basically having a pop in hindsight at the Worldwide Developer Conference from last year, where they went big on AI. And he was basically, to summarise it, and you'd have to click through on it. I've told you who it is. Just think of the bloke from Die Hard. It's called Daring Fireball, his blog, and it's very good. And he basically is going, it's vaporware. They were making lots of promises, but there was nothing substantial to it. It was all just like, we're going to do this, and you just wait, it will be fucking great. And then by the time it got to March of this year, he was like, hold on a sec, this isn't happening. So that's why he wrote that. Anyway, the only reason I bring it up is this guy from Stratacherry made the point that John Gruber has always done a pod on the eve of WWDC. And he's always got an Apple exec because he's in there with them. And this was the first year ever they just went, nah, no one's coming. And so people are joining the dots and going, maybe it's because he wrote.
But it's interesting, though, that they have done a couple of video interviews.
Wall Street Journal?
Yeah, there was Joanna Stern.
Is that her?
Yeah, and
she grilled them.
Yeah, and
okay, so
and they held their hands up like it was shit.
And I also
this is to do the AI stuff.
I also saw one Sean, the technology correspondent at the Sun as well.
Okay,
do a supposedly exclusive interview. So they've certainly done the outbound reaches. But I think, look, Scott, I think as you kind of teed it up, and I've certainly said it. It felt like, and I know hindsight's a wonderful thing. And I actually told Apple at the time, back in January last year, you don't need to make any moves into AI.
Yeah, I kind of agree.
And it's not like Apple. Apple's normally quite patient.
Yeah, so I think they felt almost forced upon.
Yeah.
Because of, and unfortunately, stakeholder pressure, being investors, seeing Amazon, Microsoft, and everyone else piling into AI.
Well, I think they'd be less bothered.
What's Apple doing? So I think WWDC last year was a mistake in terms of going all in on AI when something clearly wasn't ready. Even though Apple did say it's in beta and everything else, it clearly wasn't ready.
They should have just kept their powder dry.
They
I
did
wonder
need to.
I agree that they were sort of felt they thought had to do it, but I wonder if the pressure on them would have been the same if it hadn't been for various other challenges.
I agree.
It very heavily depends on the iPhone. No one gives a shit about Vision Pro. Slowdown in sales. Supply chain problems.
But even now,
then all of a sudden it's like, well, give us a good story.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't. So that the biggest challenge Apple continuously faces is where's the tech innovation?
Yeah.
And that's always the problem
they
face.
They look to it from intelligence. It's got to be AI because everybody's talking about AI, but it doesn't have to be about AI. I actually totally agree. I don't see why there needs to be an Apple AI story.
If you look at the overall big picture, I think part of this WWDC was kind of returning to its roots, not necessarily backtrack on the whole AI bandwagon, because they certainly talked about it subtly throughout the keynote, but just try and do what you do best. Give something that perhaps consumers may feel is a little bit different in the sea of sameness that consists around UI. And if you look at the OSs, to a certain degree, perhaps it needed a bit of freshening up. So if you look at it from that perspective,
I think that's fair enough. I don't think that's an overly sympathetic point of view. And other people I respect, such as Richard Windsor at Radio Free Mobile, his blog. He just said Apple runs home to mama, which you could say is a bit sarky. But then his first paragraph, he said, in the absence of AI, Apple did what it does best, which is to revamp the look and feel of its user experience. And
I agree. Spot on.
Yeah. So I think
I think my headline was Apple returns to its roots.
Oh, I've got you on up. Yeah. Yes, Apple returns to its roots with new software design.
Yeah.
Oh, you go for capitalising the letters. They do that on light reading as well. I don't approve of that.
No, we don't. That's a very old thing.
Oh, you've stopped doing that, have you?
My latest story that you said up.
You're right. I'd stand corrected.
You need to watch that Wall Street Journal video.
You used to, though.
Because it's like 6 years ago, man.
Fuck off. It's more recently than that. Sorry, what were you saying,
You need to watch that Wall Street Journal interview because it's him, it's Federighi, who's head of...
Craig, yeah. Great opening video.
He's great.
Of him in the Formula One car going around Apple Park. Then Tim Cook puts the headset on. Absolute masterstroke.
Total. But then it's him and the CMO, And then she grills them like, what's happened with Siri? It's still shit, basically.
Right,
They're like, yeah, I mean, but they do push back on, people say it was vaporware. I said, no, everything we demoed on stage was all real. But he does say, we had this thing, as soon as we veered off the what's it called, the beaten path, whatever.
Yeah, beaten track.
It started becoming a bit shit, to paraphrase.
Yeah.
And then so we felt like this was not to our standards. So that's why.
It's a weird question though, because someone's saying, what about Siri? It's a bit shit. As an Apple consumer, maybe I'm a bit out of touch, I don't know. But the idea of them being more in on AI and me having to have a device that all of a sudden it's like you can't avoid having AI on it, that would actually put me off using Apple stuff. Does anybody buy a device because they want AI pre-integrated into it? I fucking don't.
Well,
I never use Siri, by the way. I never make any use of it at all.
Same.
First of all, on the whole Siri point, I think Tim Cook said on the last earnings call, we're not ready to talk about or release any updated features regarding Siri. So
Good.
I think
do other stuff.
There were there were clearly low expectations. So I think from that perspective, we weren't really expecting much on the Siri side. And I totally agree. And I think I say in the piece, Ian, going back to the Scott, going back to the earlier comment that we were talking about, AI. It's not the most sought after feature when people are looking to buy a smartphone. Ultimately, they want a phone that works, caters to their need, but
great screen.
But they just want to make a voice call.
Are people asking those questions about Samsung, Xiaomi? The other
they want a great camera.
Brands? Are they saying, why don't you have AI?
However, it has to be acknowledged. I think Samsung has done a really good job with the Galaxy range now, the premium top tier, to really position Galaxy AI at the forefront.
I'm going to push back on that.
Okay, fair enough. You're more than happy to.
But this is a tangent I wanted to go off on, which is AI and devices in general, and it's what Ian was just talking about. I covered that. So Samsung's always the problem that Android vendors have always had versus Apple. Now you're getting a thirst on now, aren't you?
I've got a very important.
You've got to go in 15 minutes. The problem Android vendors have had way back, like before I did this job, I was a smartphone analyst at Strategy Analytics.
And a fine one you were.
Thank you. And you used to compete with your colleague Ben Wood when I was at, I think ostensibly, I mean, we were all mates.
Yeah, we're all I think the camaraderie that exists amongst us.
There's no aggro at all.
I think it's brilliant, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's chalk and cheese when I look at telco and media, but I certainly when the telco industry, I think it's absolutely.
We've had other telco journalists on that. I'm fine with that. Pierre's starting to.
I'm like, I actually want to hear your point.
Oh, yeah, okay. So the point, hold on. Pierre wants to hear my point. Pierre wants to hear my point, Paola. Stop interrupting me.
Sorry, Flash.
Is AI and devices. So the big dilemma all the way back. See, now he's interrupting.
Oh, my God. This point's never going to get made.
All the way back to when I was an analyst, that's the only reason I made that reference, is when you're Android, how is a Samsung different from a Xiaomi, different from a Pixel, different from a Motorola, different from a whatever? And all Samsung did when I covered the thing, I don't know if we're referring to exactly the same announcement, but they were talking about how they're like doubling down on AI, and they had this absurd launch about 10 years ago, this thing called Bixby, which presumably no one who owns a Samsung ever uses, but that was like their Siri, I suppose. And one thing Samsung's is really well known for is being a fast follower. Yeah, they're not necessarily the most innovative, but as soon as you come out with a feature, they'll have it in fucking 3 months. Mm-hmm. Anyway,
I think Samsung's done a really good job with the categories around flip and fold.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And
they were quite early on those, but I'm not actually that
they've really
sold on foldy phones.
It's a separate conversation, but I think they've done a really good job of driving innovation in that particular
hardware.
Because
on the hardware.
Because they're a screen
and the
company
Galaxy AI. People are using the AI features on there, and predominantly Gemini. It's very well integrated into the device experience.
So that's a good, that's a good caveat.
And they've brought out features such as live translate, etc., which now Apple are following.
Oh yeah, that's something they did mention. Yeah.
So I
live
think
translate, that's fucking useful.
So I think
I've got no argument with that.
I think a lot of that, we could have a conversation now. Chinese and Italian or English and Italian, and it would be translated right in front of us, all done offline.
Yeah. So that's brilliant.
I think the voice as well, which was cool.
Yeah, so I think that there are some subtle features that I think Samsung have done a really good job in collaboration with Google in bringing them to market. Now, there's a wider challenge in how Google differentiates its Pixel products, given that some of those features are then available.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, so the only thing I wanted to lead up to, no, and I've
I think it's all valid points.
No, and I've got another question for you anyway.
Oh, have you?
But
Only one?
I think, we haven't got much time left, because you've got better things to do.
I've given you more airtime, Scott, than the co-CEO of Netflix, who I'm going to later.
Fair enough.
Sorry,
I win Netflix. Just AI on consumer device in general. So we've had the conversation about Samsung. I still push back a little bit in that
I'm trying to give a balanced view here.
No, totally,
I'm really
totally. And I'm pushing back not to say you're wrong. I'm just giving you a slight sort of counter perspective in that for them to go all in on AI, they're basically going all in yet again on a Google product. But what I wanted to ask you more broadly, and maybe this can lead up to your shades that you got on there, is AI in consumer device on the whole. So like as I framed you at the start, there we are, looking even more cool and Italian than you were before. For people listening, he's just put on some Ray-Ban shades, but they're not just regular Ray-Ban shades, are they, Paolo? Why don't you tell us what you're wearing?
They're Ray-Ban Meta AI that allows me to take pictures.
Can you see Ian naked?
Video clips,
you look like John Turturro.
listen to music, make calls, and then ask Meta AI specific questions.
Is that what that flashing light is so that we know you're recording?
That was taking a picture.
Is that targeting me?
And now recording.
When you lift them up, do you like red bolts come out of your eyes and zap somebody?
Yeah. You should put the recording you just did. You should share that with us or put it on social media.
I'm happy to
put
that onto you. Yeah, look, so we get a whole view of all of us in the room.
So my broader question is AI in consumer devices. I personally, Ian was just saying he never uses Siri, and I know Siri is like a previous iteration of something that called itself AI. I'm not that bothered. I'm not inclined to go, hello, Google, tell me how to live my life or whatever. But what do you think, Paolo, from your experience on covering this sector? Is it a real differentiator? Do people is there a demand for lots more AI features and devices?
No. I think people don't know that there are going to be certain features that are going to be enabled through the promise of AI, which is effectively replace the word smart, that will improve the way that they do things in a much more quicker way. But ultimately right now they're not looking to buy a product to say, look, I want to have that because it's got AI or AI powered. So I think right now that's very, very clearly the case. I think once they start using the phone, it's one of these things that certainly you gravitate towards. It's like the same whole conversation around 4G and 5G. You know, people started buying 5G phones, so naturally there was the adoption for people kind of, you know, using the 5G network. And I think that will happen with AI. Once you start providing those tools to people, then they suddenly will start using them or feel comfortable, because there's that whole element around security, privacy as well. But there are specific instances where that AI powered feature, say, will be useful. You know, we talked about that translate, but not everything. Yeah. You know, and
that's a killer use case. So I've got no argument with that.
So you know, but not many people know that it's available or exists or how to set it up,
is it reliable?
Or even use it.
Would Trump and Xi Jinping communicate with this? What if there's like one
little mistranslation where it sounds like he's cussing his mum or something?
So here's the Meta AI app and some of the pictures and videos.
Can you airdrop it to me? I'm on.
Yeah.
So do you rate that? Do you rate this whole Meta AI shades?
Yeah, look at that video.
That's just you from those shades.
Yeah,
that
shades.
That you're wearing now. That's really high res as well. And would you be
so again? So like you just look at these and you think they're just normal Ray-Ban sunglasses. Now there's no AR feature overlay on the screen.
Right,
it's just
heads-up display.
It's just basically
that's the Google one that's coming.
So there are different devices out there. So just basic Ray-Ban sunglasses that provides a functionality that you would typically use with your phone.
So they're a peripheral.
So, and I think it's absolutely great. And, they're doing really, really well because they're actually sold and positioned as sunglasses, but being able to make calls wearing them is an absolute
sunglasses with benefits.
I think there's a clear version. And then if you're like visiting a museum and you're looking at a painting, you can say,
so
tell me more about this painting.
They're transitions. And I've also got another pair that are absolute see-through as well.
Yeah. And then, but is it true that you can point it to a painting and say, tell me more about this?
Tell me more about this picture.
Oh, you have to take a picture.
You don't want to.
Well, you don't have, or you say, Meta AI,
right.
Tell me more about this.
Right. The danger with those is you leave them on the sunbed and then sit down on them accidentally or fall asleep when you're wearing them and Like the cheap ones that you get from Benidorm, when you're looking for something to put on to keep
Those
your
are like
sun out of your eyes.
$200.
Yeah, exactly. This is exactly.
So if you break them,
Well, I imagine you take a bit more care of them, wouldn't you?
everywhere. And,
Yeah, but I think but
it charges in the case. That's kind of
charges
cool
in
too.
the case as well. Yeah.
I think I can see. I've always thought when we mentioned it earlier when we were talking about sort of slightly spurious speculative use cases for 5G, and I mentioned VR. Which is another thing that Apple have gone big on recently, which I don't think's necessarily gone that well, which is their big VR headset.
The Vision Pro.
But they'll persist with it. But I don't think. I mean, it's like $1,500 or something.
3.5.
No, more than that.
It's $3.5.
The next one is going to
$1,000.
be $1,500.
Okay, yeah. Well, anyway, 3.5. I mean, it might as well $1,500, $3.5. It's too
anyone bought
fucking
it?
expensive for me.
Yeah, a few people have bought it.
Yes, but it's like 6,
Yeah.
isn't it?
It's
literally?
a premium product.
Have you?
It's not a mass
They sold
market.
like
Have you spent quality time with
it's-
it yourself?
That's nothing.
It's not a mass market product, and what it does very, very well. I'm actually much more excited about where this goes as a category, and I firmly believe.
And Apple is working on that.
Yeah, and everyone's working on it. And
AR's always got more
tried,
promise than VR.
I've tried the Snap Spectacles, I've tried the Meta Orions, and obviously they're a bit more down the line. But I think there's a powerful combo where you start combining something like this and a watch that will get to a point in time where we won't need to have the smartphone.
So who does the tech for that? Because Ray-Ban is not
People
known.
like to watch
Well, they're
videos,
working
though.
Meta AI.
That's
Meta.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can say Meta.
Yeah.
People like to consume videos on the toilet,
Did you?
You're not going to go in there with your glasses and watch videos.
Yeah, well, what you do in your own spare time.
What you do in your toilet.
We don't want to know
What's
what
the
you're
most
doing in
downloaded
your bathroom
app?
with
Yeah.
Meta AI glasses.
What's the most downloaded app? It's a video app.
Well,
where are you going to watch that?
I think there are numerous surveys.
Yeah, sometimes people watch videos not on the bog, mate.
But
It's not.
I'm just
you're
saying-
weird.
TikTok, he's consumed on the phone.
8 minutes left.
Sorry.
But you're right.
You need
and
a screen.
And I think, look, there are different form
Yeah,
factors.
well,
out
I'll
there.
come back to that. That's a good point.
And the dedicated VR is that full fat, rich
Yeah.
experience. Well, let's be honest, it's quite closed, and everyone's kind of Meta Quest, has a dedicated VR. The Apple Vision Pro is probably best in class, and I guess the challenge with that is you can't just rely on content creators or influencers. And Blackmagic Design have now released a professional camera that allows
Stereo.
that allows native recording in spatial video that's optimized for Vision Pro. So I think Hollywood is slowly coming to look at ways of doing it, but every industry is struggling right now to spend that sort of money on a professional camera and ensure that you have content creation and production capabilities that shoot in that particular
What's the chicken and egg
perspective.
problem?
Exactly.
They're like, only 120,000 of those were sold. We're not going to bother too much.
Yeah, so
making
it's-
content.
And
It's the user base
and it's that
problem.
whole debate around the technology. Even if you look at broadly around TVs, 4K and 8K, you can make an argument towards 4K, but do you really need 8K on a
you can tell the
TV?
fucking difference.
It's very hard
From your couch?
in most living rooms in the UK. Obviously, in the US, where they have those big living rooms, they've got 120-inch displays. You can have the argument that perhaps maybe 8K, but
But
even
you still
then,
can't tell the
That's why I'd have
pixels.
a
you can't tell the
over there.
difference. Yeah, arguably, there's
Dynamic
great-
range is more important.
Well, I was going to say HD up. So why isn't he on the pod?
I am.
Well,
He is when we
so-
talk about things like
you're in
this.
his
He's on.
audio
He's doing
visual
Oh,
his-
is it?
wheelhouse.
Oh, he's
Yeah.
he's getting turned on right now, is he? Look, look at the smile
If
on
we
his
start,
face.
if we start getting on about Oprah, he'll go.
He
real
knows more
quiet.
about this now than I do, so I'm
yeah,
just
yeah.
going to sit here and.
I was going to.
No, but I think that whole area that when you look at production is
Well, in the tiny bit of time we've got left, I'm just curious about. You mentioned a second ago where we might get to a stage where you've got AI glasses. So for people who don't know what we're going on about, VR is virtual reality where you've got just a screen. It's basically just a small screen strapped to your face, whereas AR is like a digital overlay on the real world, so you still get to look at the real world. And I've always thought AR is the only realistic one because you can't wear VR outside. You'll be walking in front of cars. And
well,
shit
you
like that.
can, and believe it or not, at Apple Park, at WWDC,
Yeah, 'cause they've got
there
the-
were people walking around with Vision
And they've
Pro.
got the external facing
Because
cameras. I get
you
it.
can see where, yeah.
But it still looks a bit dicey.
I
if
think
you
what
ask
you're
me.
talking about is when people can see your actual eyes.
Eyes.
So
Well, there's
everything-
that as well.
With
There's that
these,
as well.
so if these were see-through, you obviously can see my eyes, but then the screen will have an overlay telling
And
me
also,
where
they
to
look
go.
like normal shades. You go around like one of those Apple guys you were just describing. You look like a fucking weirdo, don't you? Walking around with a VR thing strapped.
You look like someone from the
Ooh, it
Blues
made a
Brothers.
noise.
Reservoir Dogs.
So it's connected now. It's connected now. I was going to play some music.
Are we gone?
Oh, no, I'll leave it. We're
No,
running
we
out of time.
haven't got
Yeah,
enough
we're out of time.
So what I was going to lead up to, you were making a point about how maybe you can you can get to a time where with AR glasses plus smartwatch, you don't need a phone anymore. Pierre started saying, Pierre, don't know why he called you PR.
Yeah.
Is he your PA?
I've been doing this job. No, I'm thinking PR. I'm thinking press relations. Yeah, I have too much of that.
Jack of all trades, isn't he?
He made the point about, albeit in a very specific environment, consuming video on your phone.
I was kidding, but yeah.
But well, we took you seriously. It's too late.
It's just a case study of the toilet. You know?
Case study, but I think I think that is a good pushback, because unless you're going to consume the video on screens in the AR glasses, what you propose, your hypothetical future, doesn't address the fact that people still consume a hell of a lot of stuff via video, on which
video. It's
people love to watch that while they watch Netflix on the
going
TV.
Anywhere for a while.
Look, I agree. It's heavily reliant, but I do see a future where you can have the glasses with the overlay, and you can still be watching videos through those glasses. It's a reasonably pleasurable experience, even though the devices I've used today are still very much kind of simple and basic. But
that audio was good.
The audio is phenomenal, and
had a little
there are other devices that do a
them.
really good job with video. But I'm just saying, in terms of I think we are too reliant on the smartphone today. But when you look at the future generations, I do foresee a world whereby you could certainly have as much capability delivered through to the glasses that's connected through via the
a little
watch.
big tech leap, though, to me.
Yeah, I hear you.
But I can see it happening.
Did you were you aware of that announcement that happened between OpenAI and Johnny Ive?
I think I was on holiday at the time, but I did see that.
So I'll say it very briefly. We only talked about it because it was creepy, and they had a photo of them sort of hugging each other.
And the price for 50 people.
It was all a bit weird. Yeah. But basically,
it's
Johnny
like a Garfunkel cover.
That's right. Johnny Ive is the inspiration behind the iPhone and all that. And now he's got his own thing, and now he's just properly got into bed with OpenAI and Sam Altman, and they're going to come up with a device. I mean, talk about vaporware. They haven't said anything about it.
Well, let's be honest, Scott. In a relatively short period that we've seen over the last couple of years, we've had the Humane AI pin.
Yeah, we go.
We've had the Rabbit.
That one is rumored to have no screen either.
And those particular products, when they launched, huge fanfare. This is the future. It gives us a sense of where we potentially might be going.
Yeah.
But it quickly underlines the challenges in trying to bring a product, and for all of what they've achieved up until now, let's make no mistake about it, it's not that easy.
No.
I think they're shooting for the Her movie where they wanted something.
Yeah, they're going for the new UI. So the UI we have now is a touchscreen UI. Before that, it was like mouse and all that.
Well, I think
the new is voice. Yeah,
it's
totally.
voice. It's clearly voice. Everything is all about voice. Authentication. You can be much more articulate, save a lot of time rather than having to pick up the device and everything else. So yeah,
and the modern iteration of generative AI, which is very natural language, is taking that on in leaps and bounds. There's no doubt about it.
But again, one of those is, the amount of investment, how open is that checkbook? And look, realistically, we've already seen, some early products that haven't really taken off. Let's be frank about it. So again, that's something that's very much, I would like to say speculative bet, but one that, there just seems to be everyone's piling into this whole area, hoping that there's something at the light at the end of the tunnel.
There's a very sort of faddish, FOMO-ish, hype-ish aspect to it. And that was what was most surprising. To finish off on Apple, I'm not trying to entrap you into getting in the shit with Apple just before we finish. But I think all they really did wrong... Yeah. I think all they really did wrong is, uncharacteristically, they just went a bit too hard, a bit too soon. And normally they're quite patient. Normally they wait for other people like Samsung to make the first move, and then they try and refine it and do it better. And this time they just thought, shit. They seem to. I mean, I don't know. I've got no inside information on Apple whatsoever.
Well, but equally as well, let's be frank about it. Even though my comment that I said earlier, they didn't have to. They were forced into it. They've done it now. Have they lost any credibility as a result of it? Have they lost any customers as a result of it? No. And let's be frank about it again. Who's really making money from AI? It just seems to be a huge splash of cash.
No one's making money at all.
no one's making money
Nvidia's
from it.
doing it.
Nvidia, yeah, good point.
Well,
Nvidia making a fuck ton of money.
But not from, where's that flow of money? It's certainly not coming from the consumers right now. So
It's coming from people like OpenAI.
But I think if you look at what Apple is trying to do, you're trying to kind of create an environment whereby, you can kind of drive engagement. If you drive that engagement, then further down the line, in hope that you'll get rewarded from your customer base. So, but to
and they do have to innovate,
and they have shown elements of innovation. But let's make no mistake about it. When you look at Apple, the core product to Apple is the iPhone, and that's the gateway to the Apple universe. And that's a key product that they have to protect.
If they started,
and not mess about,
if they started losing
with,
share, globally, I know they've got regional things like China where there's special circumstances, but if they started losing share globally, that would be a fucking issue.
That's how, again, to go back to the Wall Street interview, that's how they closed the interview, saying, we just want to focus on making good products and then everything else will fall into places, which is apparently something that Steve Jobs had said when he came back, and they're bashing that again at the end.
Makes sense.
Hence why they're returning back to their roots and doing what they do best.
Which is what a lot of people...
Sorry, to segue into your next meeting, Reed Hastings said the same thing. Who's going to win the streaming war? He was like, we're just focusing on making the best content. Whoever makes the best content is going to win. Let's not focus on
I will say one very quickly about UIs. We've been watching stuff... We're about to stop there. We've been watching stuff on Disney Plus. And their UI and their user experience versus something like Netflix is shite. It never remembers where we left off. If we end halfway through a thing, we have to go and find it.
I was going to say, I wouldn't say shite, I'd say it's extremely poor.
and Amazon Prime as well.
Yeah, they're not. Netflix are best in class right now.
Yeah.
But what is Netflix? Is it a streaming company? Is it a tech company? Is it a content company? Is it a studio or is it a channel?
Well, you're about to find out, aren't you?
All of the above, not a channel.
See...
But it's sports. Okay, yeah.
Well, look,
live sports. Yeah.
Well, no, what? But anyway, are they dancing around live sports?
Oh yeah,
cool.
And then you got the pretenders to the crown to be the Netflix of sports, the Zone.
Well, Paolo,
so much to talk about.
Well, exactly.
Can I come back?
Can
I come back?
Do you know what? That's exactly what I was going to lead
into.
Can
I come back?
Of course you can.
Please.
You're always welcome.
5 years.
I've been hassling you to come on for ages, and let's make it a regular thing. Especially when you think that there's when you've been to an event or you think there's a major inflection point that's worth chatting about. Just give me a prod, and we'll get you back on any time.
Oh, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, mate. We better call it a day so you can go off to your next meeting.
Ian's got a very busy...
He's got some shit to do as well.
You can just go straight to the pub on your own.
God, and I'm meeting a mate later, and I've got started at 10 to 12. I'm going to have to drink some water at some stage.
Yeah.
What's that?
It's real men don't drink water. So I'm going to say our next pod is going to be from Copenhagen, Digital Transformation World, so it might be at a different time. But I'll wrap it up there and say thanks a lot for listening, and make sure you join us for that one.